Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the show where we often take two films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. But not today. Today is another Halfisode, which is a term that we paid a lot of money to a marketing firm to come up with, and we feel like that was money well spent. Also, we're lazy and, we have video games to play and stuff like that, so what are we going to do? Work? Now, before we begin, I do want to remind everyone that this is not a film review podcast, it's a film discussion podcast. So because of that, we are going to talk spoilers. If you haven't seen the film that we're going to discuss here today, it's going to be available for streaming online right now. So feel free to go ahead and check that out first, then come back with us. But if you'd like to stick around, we will be walking you through the film. So even if you haven't seen it, you should be able to enjoy it. All right, with that out of the way, let's get to the program. My name is Jason Peters, and with me today is the man that Tim Burton once described as delightfully macabre, Mr. Ryan Siebold.
What's up, Jason? How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How is life in Tampa, sir?
Hot and humid.
Yeah, it's brutal over here in LA too. It's like we're having triple digits this weekend, so pretty rough.
Yep, it's time for staying indoors. No time for going outside right now.
Exactly. And what better activity to keep you entertained than watching films and coming here and discussing them with us?
Absolutely.
What do we got on tap, Ryan?
We're doing El Mariachi today.
Yes,
classic.
Yes.
First film by Mr. Robert Rodriguez. This one's near and dear to me. Back in 1992, I was but 12 years old. 93, I guess, maybe it was 93. 1993, yes. I'm just double checking right now. Sorry about that. 13 years old. Just getting ready to hit high school, and El Mariachi drops. And this was about the age, too, Jason, that I was like, just starting to pay attention to these kinds of movies and, trying to go find them at Blockbuster and, who's this Quentin Tarantino fella I keep hearing about, that sort of thing. So, movie stores weren't quite as rife with, smaller films. You kind of had to go to smaller little mom and pop video shops to find these movies. And then, as the 90s progressed, Blockbuster caught on and get caught up with the times. But you always kind of felt like, or I personally felt like, I'm a cinephile, like I'm into this shit. You don't know what I know. It always kind of gave me a leg up on my friends and family to know what El Mariachi was or to know what Reservoir Dogs was. Now it's pretty commonplace because we have, so many ways to watch these. But just know that this was a challenge back in the day to see this movie. All right, so iTunes and Apple.com describe this as El Mariachi, an action adventure from 1993, sitting at a nice hour and 21 minutes. So we can get through this pretty quickly. All he wants to be is a mariachi like his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather before him. But the town he thinks will bring him luck brings only a curse of deadly mistaken identity. Forced to trade his guitar for a gun, the mariachi is playing for his life in this critically acclaimed film debut from director Robert Rodriguez, made for 2 used condoms and a nickel.
Apple said that?
So,
wow.
Jason, yeah, they're kind of branching out to the extreme market. Jason, what'd you think about this movie?
Okay, dude. So here's the thing, man. First of all, let's get this right out of the gate, okay? Acknowledging up front, like, props to this 22, 23-year-old kid for making a feature film, getting it picked up by a major distributor, and getting it out there, right? I'm pretty sure at that time, like, I was probably just, like, getting hammered in a corner somewhere while this guy was, like, actually making, like, something out of himself, right? So, or at the very least, I think that was, like, right around the time we were in film school together, actually, dude, when I was 23. Either way.
Yeah.
Either way, I certainly was not directing and, completing feature films. Probably half started, like, 3 different screenplays and didn't do anything with them. So major respect to this, kid for making this thing and getting it done and seeing it through and having the vision and all that. That being said, it's not a great film in and of itself, Ryan. I mean, I'm sure that there's a certain level of having to view this lens through history to be able to appreciate it for what it was. But, like, this is the type of movie that alcoholics watch at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday on Cinemax. Okay? This is, like, not a film that is elegant. It's not a film that is, it's an action movie without much action and everything that goes along with an action movie. And this is kind of so it's a low budget action movie, and I think that one of the most unfortunate things about low budget action movies is like you don't go to action movies for great dialogue, for, elegant character arcs, any of these things. Like, you go there for action scenes. You go there to watch people fire guns and get the crap beat out of them and beat the crap out of other people and get chased by cars and blah, 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 and all that shit that we like, right? So when you make a movie for $7,000, which was the budget on this film, there's just not a lot of resources to have a ton of action movies. So instead we get an entire 5-minute scene of a musical performance in a bar in an 80-minute movie. And it's like, that's just filler. And so again, I'm certainly not going to compare what this cat was doing at 22 to what I was doing at 22. All the respect in the world for the fact that, it started his career and things worked out for him, but didn't love the film. What did you think, Ryan?
I mean, if we're not going to compare what you both were doing at 22, we probably really shouldn't compare what you're both doing at 36, 37, 38.
How dare you,
believe
sir?
That would be too.
I don't hear Rodriguez starting a podcast out of his house. Thank you very much.
Take that.
Take that, sir.
The other thing I wanted to add was, how did you know I watched this at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday? Like that's kind of specific.
Hitting a little close to home with that one, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying all Floridians are alcoholics. So here we are watching El Mariachi. It's just when Floridians watch vibes, El Mariachi is 1 a.m. on a
Just got the vibes, man.
This movie is very dated. In a way, not a good way. I feel like there were a lot of movies that came out from auteurs around this time. So this was early 90s, seems like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of a resurgence of the indie auteur out of the studio system kind of deal. So
sure, yeah.
The 70s had its auteurs. The 80s had its auteurs in a different way. But I feel like the 80s to me always kind of is, when I think of the 80s, I think it's the resurgence of the studio system. It's Indiana Jones, it's Ghostbusters, it's Goonies, it's Spielberg and Zemeckis and, all these big fantasy movies and blockbuster films. That was the 80s to me. It was cocaine and discotheque and Studio 54 and all the good stuff, Flash. And then the 90s came and it was grunge and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and, indie hip hop and the boom bap movement and all of that. And then we also had these movies, and you got people like Kevin Smith coming out. You've got Linklater, Richard Linklater, Dickie Links. I call him Dickie Links. You got
great name,
Robert Rodriguez, and you got Quentin Tarantino, and some of these movies hold up. Some don't. They got high acclaim because of the same reason I think I opened with, which is they were kind of an in the know, kind of underground, gritty. I remember these weren't movies you saw at 8 o'clock at your local Cinemaplex. This was a movie that your friends had a VHS copy of that they found or were able to buy in a bargain bin or something. There was like one copy on the shelf, and you had to wait, 3 weeks till it finally became available. Movies like Slacker, which is on our list, I think. Clerks. I remember that these movies, they kind of paved the way to Singles, Cameron Crowe's Singles. I don't know if you've watched that recently, but that didn't hold up very well.
No, I bet it did.
Matt Dillon with an Eddie Vedder haircut. But that kind of paved the way for studios to take some chances on some smaller films as well. And then you get movies like In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter. You get Friday with Ice Cube and Chris Tucker, kind of launched Chris Tucker's career. Reality Bites, directed by Ben Stiller, Winona Ryder. I kind of feel like this kind of falls in line. You start to talk about all these and look at the bigger picture and zoom out a bit. And they either had their place in history because they were good films or because they paved the way for other good films to be made. Very few films in the 90s kind of held up. I don't know. That's just my little diatribe. I digress.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to look at it through that historical lens to be able to appreciate it. And I think that your ability and look, that's kind of the deal with like nostalgia, right? Like there are people, which I don't understand this at all, but there are people that, think it's difficult to go back and watch Jurassic Park. Now, I've watched that movie
What?
within the last few years, and I think it holds up just as well as anything else. But there's people that argue like, no, it's actually not a good film, and it's just your nostalgia that you're leaning on without realizing it. And I'm like, that's bullshit, dude. That's like a good movie.
Those people are damn fools. Stop being friends with those people.
Well, for what it's worth, it's like other like, you know, like film critics and like, you know, like sort of the film discussions that are happening like online, you know, Reddit, other podcasts, things like that. But
I to your point though, I think that some of these movies, I disagree. First off, Jurassic Park is a huge blockbuster. I don't think that falls in line with what we're talking about because they threw hundreds of millions of dollars at that film to make it work. But
sure.
Outside of being Steven Spielberg, I think there's movies on these smaller scales that, again, just like you said, like are remembered as being great films. I can't tell you how many times I watched Friday as a kid, you know, or Half Baked or Clerks or In the Mouth of Madness. Geez, Event Horizon is another one.
That's a really good movie, dude. I'm glad that kind of like, I don't know if you have been aware of this, but Event Horizon's kind of like gotten a resurgence over the years. Like I guess it's kind of becoming one of those cult movies. It's really cool, dude. It's definitely the best thing Paul W.S. Anderson has ever done by a mile.
Oh, absolutely.
Compared to his shitty AVP movies.
God, no, you're not wrong. I do really like. I like all these movies. And I liked El Mariachi as well. Yeah. I just think that the 90s were a weird time for technology too, because we were almost to where we're at now. From 2000 on, once we got modern cell phones and smartphones, it's all kind of been very similar. But when you see people using, My first note of this film, kind of bringing it back now that we've talked about the genre, talking about this movie in particular, El Mariachi, the cordless phones with the floppy antennas and the pull-out antennas were hilarious.
Oh, man,
Our head bad guy, Moko, uses this cordless phone with a floppy antenna, and I know this antenna well. My friends' parents had this phone. I'm sure anyone that's watched this movie, but it's hard to take this guy seriously in all white, looking like this, hard gangster man who's supposed to be ultimately menacing, and he's got this what looks to be a floppy dong coming off of his phone, just kind of like rattling around behind his head.
Okay, Ryan, hold on. Now, before we continue, dude, I got to ask you one thing, which is like, where did you watch this film?
Originally or this time?
No. Like this time. Did you get it through Amazon? Did you watch it on Crackle? Where'd you watch it?
Oh, yeah. I watched this through Amazon. Yeah, I rented it.
Okay, cool.
It was 99 cents.
Correct. Yeah, I did too. So to anybody listening, so obviously like us, you're going to go online and you're going to search for this film, right? Okay, so if you haven't yet, or if you have before, Ryan, I don't know if you did this, but there is a free version on Crackle. Okay? You don't have to pay any money for it. I'm sure this is why Amazon lowered their price to 99 cents. However, the version on Crackle is the English dub. Okay? Now, Ryan,
no.
I actually started watching the first 5 to 7 minutes on Crackle because, again, I'm a cheap bastard. If I can save a buck, dude, I'm going to save a buck, right? And I didn't realize that it was dubbed. And it starts, and if you can imagine, go figure, but in 1992, the studio system and general population, when it comes to dubbing of Mexican voices, was not exactly sympathetic. And so right off the bat, dude, like, you get this Moko, and it's just like the broadest stereotype of like a white person doing like a Mexican accent, like, "Hey Martin, where you going?" Like, he sounds like freaking like Speedy Gonzalez or some shit, right? And I gave it like 3 minutes, and I was like, dude, if I could watch this, but it would be a very different review. And honestly, looking back, it might have been a lot more fun. Like, we might want to do like a bonus episode where we go back and just watch the English dub.
And watch the dubbed version. That would be fantastic.
The one thing I will tell you is that on this episode, all of our clips are that English dub. So you guys are all going to get a taste of the brilliance of white people interpreting Mexican voices in 1992. It's amazing. Yeah, not sympathetic in the slightest. It's funny because like it ends up, it's basically the equivalent, dude, of like those old shitty dubs of like Japanese kung fu and Godzilla. You know, like we used to make fun of all the times at a kids where, you know, you're like, hey, what's going on, and like your mouth's still moving and shit. You know, like that joke we all made, like.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's legit like that, dude. So if anybody hasn't seen it and you're thinking about doing the Crackle version, don't. It's horrible unless you just want to get fucked up and just giggle your ass off, in which case, yeah, go ahead. It's not going to cost you anything. But if you really want to take...
I am all in for the latter.
If you really want to take the film seriously, just go to Amazon, spend the 99 cents. I think you can even buy it for $7.99 if you do like this film. Like I said, it wasn't a strong buy for me. Just the heavy late night Cinemax vibes were a little bit much, and it wasn't in that like sexy softcore porn sort of way. So like, yeah, man, it wasn't Red Shoe Diaries, so I passed. Probably a commentary on me more than the film.
Man, I just love that you have like a sliding scale between the quality of your dubbing you'll accept versus the titties you need in the movie to offset it.
Content is king, my friend. What can I say?
Like, well, you're starting to slide into needing more titties country. I don't know if I'm going to sit through any more of this.
I believe this characterizes us as woke, right? This is a very woke conversation we're having right now, right?
Yeah, this is great.
So, dude, let's get... Yeah. So now that we're like, what, 15 minutes into this damn thing, let's go ahead and get started on the film.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we did watch a movie, everybody.
We did. So when we open up, we actually open up on this, you know, it's a wide angle lens because I'm sure he just had one lens to work with and that's what he was doing. It's on this, you know, some sort of funky framing of like a beat up cop car. And it's in front of this like old school small ass jail and prison. And, you know, the policewoman drives up. She enters the building. That's where we get introduced to the mob. I don't know if he's like a mob boss or I think he's kind of his own entity. Either way, he's a drug dealer, let's say. His name is Azul, actually. And he's sort of running his business out of the prison. He gets a call from like this other drug dealer who's a, you know, step up in the food chain who kind of runs the city or whatever it is. His name is Moko. And he is very clearly a white dude who has been given like, it's funny because like he's like blonde haired and blue eyes, and actually in the
right.
in the Mexican language version, like his Spanish accent is like more pronounced than the actual like his like Mexicans. So like it was kind of
well,
weird.
you know, he doesn't speak Spanish.
Really? I mean,
so he doesn't. That's why this is hilarious to me when you talk about the English dubbing, because for anything Moko related, which by the way means booger in Spanish, and again, I watched this with my brother and his fiance came over. We put it on. I told him we were watching this thing, and so we made a night of it. And she speaks Spanish. She's Dominican, and so. She translated some of these names. I think one's like cucumber, one's but one the baddest of the bad guy is named Moko, which means booger, and she just kept giggling that she couldn't take this guy seriously. But Rodriguez made this paid for this movie by having experiments done on him and trying new drugs in doctors' offices.
Wow,
where they pay you the $100 or whatever, and he got $100 a day for 30 days or something, and raised a bunch of money that way.
Wow.
In those test trials, he met Peter Marquardt, who played Moko in the film. Didn't speak a lick of Spanish, but had the look Rodriguez wanted. So he's like, "Come on, be on my movie." So they actually held Spanish cue cards up right off of camera that he was just reading the Spanish and hoping he got it right. He didn't know what he was saying at all, and so. I would love to see an English dubbing of him performing Spanish, not knowing Spanish as an English guy.
Dude,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I swear
Language
he at least
inception.
had some like very basic Spanish, like "¿Qué? ¿Cómo?" something like that. Like, you're telling me he just spoke English the entire movie? Was I that out of it watching it?
No. He spoke Spanish. He off of cue cards. They had to feed him those lines.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. I thought you were
he
saying
was reading. He was reading his lines. He would like learn his lines. He'd like read through like 3 or 4 of them.
Gotcha.
And then action, and then he would just like go through what he just read, and then he'd be like, I got nothing else.
Total
I can't ad lib.
move.
Basically, he couldn't ad lib or.
Yeah, total actor move where he just has like no idea what he's saying. He's like, I don't know, I just say the words on the card, right? Like Ron Burgundy signing off, right? Like if it's there, I'm gonna read it.
Good night and go fuck yourself.
So yeah, dude. So basically, the movie begins when Moko has an assassination attempt where he sends in some guys that look like they were like, I don't know, Rodriguez's tax accountants and attorneys or some shit. They certainly didn't look like professional baddies, but I think this is, don't you get the idea that he just went around to everybody in his like small ass Mexican town and was like, hey, want to help me out and play a role? And they were like, sure,
no, that's exactly what happened.
Else.
That's exactly what happened. Extras, even if they had lines, if they weren't key actors, they were just people on the street that saw him filming. He's like, want to be in my movie? And then in this opening scene you're describing, apparently all the police officers and prison guards were actually police officers and prison guards. And he's like, well, I could save money by just hiring them because I don't have to get any wardrobe. They're already wearing costumes. Wow. So
looking
just
smart.
come on in. Like that woman that comes in and like clanks the wrench on the jail bars and wakes him up. That's straight up. She was a police officer working in that particular jail.
Wow.
They're like, just do this and hit the edge. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. And that's, that kind of does lead to one thing that I will give this movie and Rodriguez specifically a lot of credit for, which is that like he didn't try to pretend like he didn't have $7,000 to work with, he does over the course of the film make really smart decisions. Like he does try to stretch that budget, whether it's just the way that he films or blocks a scene or, where he decides to spend his money. He does a really good job of really stretching that $7,000. I mean, I don't know what the equivalent is today, but it can't be more than double or something like that. Either way, it's but at the same
and technology's come down. He spent most of that on film stock because he shot this on 16 millimeters. So you have processing and telecine and color correction and all that shit. And he went down to videotape and he edited on tape, I believe, but he still shot on 16 and he spent most of his budget on that. So, and he came in ahead of schedule and under budget when he delivered his film at a budget of $7,000. So
good for him, man. Yeah, that'll get you future work every single time.
I really want to ask you: is it your opinion? Is this kind of El Mariachi and movies like this that were made at this time? Is this kind of the dawn of guerrilla filmmaking as we know it? I know there were some people, even maybe like, I don't know if you'd consider Cassavetes in that regard, but, again, through the 80s and even part of the 70s, I kind of feel like even our auteur movement was under the studio system to a certain degree. Your Scorsese's, your Woody Allen's, your, Coppola's, etc. But this wasn't. This was a guy who borrowed a friend's camera and just went out and made a movie. And this is what filmmakers have been telling indie filmmakers to do as their key course of advice ever since. It's just go make something, keep talking about it, go be about it. Do you think this is like one of the first films that you could think of, Jason, that falls under that category of guerrilla filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that in terms of starting a movement, perhaps, because I do think that we saw a lot of that in sort of the 60s and 70s, right? Before the studio system had sort of taken over, because I forget the exact history behind it, but I think it was like there was some weird connection with like the mob and they like funneled a bunch of money. So there was like a period in the 60s where they didn't like have the same money that they did before or something like that. So they were basically just like handing all these like Yahoo hippies like a few grand and a camera and being like, hey, go make some shit. So right. I think that it wasn't really, that sort of started I think when it comes to the guerrilla filmmaking process, I would say that was probably the start of it, and then it evolved over time and then grew, and then cats like Kevin Smith and Rodriguez and all these guys sort of took that mantle in the 90s, but then it sort of became its own sort of subgenre in a way in the 90s, like like you said, the auteur movement, and I think that led to cats like Paul Thomas Anderson being given, big studio roles at like 24, where maybe that wouldn't have happened beforehand. So yeah, that's the thing, dude. All these guys, they're like in their early 20s, dude. It just it puts a lot of pressure on people like us who it's like, oh well, I'm 30 and I don't have anything, so my career is over before it started. And then it's like, well, no, dude, like all these cats are in their 50s and 60s for the most part. It's easy to get caught up in like the youth movement, but You know, you take a step back and there's a reason most directors are older, you know, as opposed to younger.
Well, you could take a seat at that table any time you want. That's the wonderful part about filmmaking. Some people make their first film at 19. Some people make their first film at 40. You know, there's no wrong time to go be a storyteller. When you have a story to tell, you tell it, and when you're ready to step up to that plate and make those sacrifices, you can. I think that this is one of those films that I always looked at when I was younger as like one of the first times I'd heard of people using like wheelchairs and shopping carts as dollies and shooting out of the backs of trucks is like, your techno crane or whatever is like, I don't know, sweeping shots and fast movement and this and that. So this is a very DIY. How can I emulate these shots that I've seen my whole life? How do I get that on with no money? And, instead of a dolly and dolly track and a grip, you get a shopping cart or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. But dude, so, okay, but take like the first Evil Dead, right? What is that? Like 78, something like that?
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing,
Horror
right?
was
Like they had to
definitely an
DIY
exception. You're absolutely right. Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah. Putting it on the wood plank to get the POV shots and shit. So like people had been doing that, but I think I think the difference is that I don't think the 80s had much of that, right? Maybe it was because it was the decade of Exodus. There was a lot of money. Like I don't quite know the history of the 80s because I was just a little baby boy, right? But I don't think you had the auteur movement in the 80s. So maybe it was like it had kind of started to germinate in the 60s and carried through to the 70s, and then there was like a dormant period in the 80s, and then it came back in the 90s, and then also because of our age, that's in our 90s was where like you and I really started
Those
to
are the ones I remember.
take note of film and really pay attention and take an additional interest. So I'm sure there's a lot of influences, but I do think that it was probably certainly within our generation, and it was celebrated to a degree that you don't see anymore, and maybe that's because it was in that sweet spot where it was right before, all of this affordable technology hit the market to where anybody for a few grand could go make a movie. So, when a 23-year-old kid, grabbed $7,000 and, a bunch of chutzpah and went out and made a movie, it was a big deal. And, today it'd be like, wow, get in line, kid. Yeah, there's fucking 24 people just like you.
Well, and also, too, like I said earlier, I think the 90s, I always think of the 90s as like the height or the peak of the VHS market. So these movies all became more accessible to us in the 90s than probably they were in the 70s or 80s when, and not everyone had a VHS player to go home and watch movies. And, 90s were the 5 movies, 5 days for $5, and you can go get all these awesome classics and get caught up. Dude, but you're right, though. Horror films are the exception.
I remember renting the entire Evil Dead trilogy one night because I hadn't seen any of them, and I just it was 3 for $5 from Blockbuster, and you get them for 2 or 3 nights or whatever, and just marathoned them back to back. I can't even imagine marathoning 3 movies back to back anymore. It's crazy.
Simpler all
times,
the time.
Man.
Yeah. All the time. Yeah. And, I did Godfather on a Thanksgiving weekend because I had an extended weekend from school. And I rented all 3 Godfather films and watched them in my bedroom on a 13-inch black and white television over the course of the weekend. And
that's awesome.
I don't think I finished the third one. But I remember hating Godfather for a long time because of that. I was like, those movies are shit. He was like, yeah, dipshit. You watched them all back to back on a 13-inch black and white television. Not really the auteur's intended experience that he wanted you to sit down in front of a...
That's great, man. We're definitely showing our age right now, for sure.
Yes. Give me some Ecto Cooler.
Bring on Saturday morning cartoons.
So back to this movie we watched. I swore we watched this movie, everybody.
Okay, so real quick, man, I'm gonna go ahead. We
haven't even finished the first scene. I'm so sorry.
We're so far into this. Oh man, we're good at this, aren't we?
Oh, we're the best. The good news is I'm almost out of notes on this movie, so I'll shut up soon.
Oh, dude, I'm only on page 2 of 6, so we're gonna have to just blow through mine.
I'll shut up. You take the wheel.
Skipping forward.
Jason, take the wheel.
So when we get introduced to the protagonist, he's got this guitar case, shows up to this bar, he's looking for work, trying to follow in his father's footstep as a mariachi, and we get something that, would become a staple of Rodriguez filmmaking, both for this film and moving forward, which is that he is not afraid of broad comedy, man. Like, he, doesn't make pure action movies. Like, he tends to make sort of like action comedies, right? And even his, more serious stuff definitely has comedic effects, right? Like, even From Dusk Till Dawn, there's like the whole silly Los Lobos moment where they're, playing the dead bodies as their instruments. Like, he's definitely not afraid to be silly. We see that in that scene where he's trying to sell his mariachi services to the bartender. He's like, why would I get with you? I've got this like entire, orchestra right here. And it's this guy on this like synth. And then he like, there's these silly sound effects and the whole thing's done in like this sped up fast motion. And then he plays just the most ridiculous music. And so like, I do kind of dig that about him, like I thought that moment, it was super cheesy, right? But there's also kind of a part where it's like, the fact that he's willing to just not take himself seriously is kind of refreshing. And that is also a staple of 90s action movies. They did not take themselves seriously at all, dude. So when you go back and you watch these like Schwarzenegger and Stallone films and all of this stuff, man, like you could never get away today with just like murdering a bunch of like, like foreign terrorists or whatever, and then making a cheesy pun, right? Like those things are viewed through a much more realistic lens. Whereas in the 90s, like everything was still sort of over the top and cartoonish, and people weren't really taking this shit seriously. Yeah. So you definitely still get a lot of that vibe in this film. Which is nice,
I cannot wait to see RoboCop for that reason. RoboCop, by the way, for our listeners, is on our list. Paul Verhoeven, early Verhoeven. I'm so excited to watch RoboCop again.
Yeah,
through this lens.
And that's funny because that one was actually a bit of a point of contention between us too, because we kind of went back and forth, like, is it? I mean, this is esoteric cinema. Is it a little bit too big? Like, have too many people seen it to be on the list? But Ryan gave a very impassioned defense, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it went right on there. So, yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
you got a brain and eyeballs in a water tank. I mean, I'm all in for that. It's a bunch of silliness that you don't think. You just think of RoboCop as like a toy selling commercial machine, and the sequels were dumbed down and made for children, I think, a little more, but. The first one's pretty hard. So I'm glad you brought up the kind of the speed up and slow-mo and odd camera movements that he does that makes it feel kind of campy. I wrote down that I thought that it was very influential for filmmakers like maybe even Edgar Wright or and gave us movies like Kung Fu Hustle.
Well, you know what this one reminded me a lot of is it kind of had like a Peter Jackson vibe. Like I was reminded, like with a lot of the like wide angle lens and close up and camera movement, it really reminded me of a lot of the shots in like early Peter Jackson, like Dead Alive and.
Well, Dead Alive was made around this time, I think, right? Yeah. That was about 93, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was similarly.
Yeah,
like
he was just over New Zealand doing the same shit.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think there was this movement, and I do think that a lot of it was just financially motivated. Again, it's like, I don't have a cinematographer with a whole lighting kit and, 7 different lenses that he can pop out, dude. Like, I just need one wide-ass lens that I can, like, keep everything in focus and just get this thing done and, keep everything in focus as easily as possible. Because I'm also, I'm directing the actors and I'm holding the damn camera on my shoulder at the same time.
So when you push the camera in and your wide angle distorts the face, a little bit, and it compresses your background in certain ways or decompresses the background, you get a certain look that we look at now maybe as, that was a cool choice, or it looks a certain way. But you're absolutely right. He's probably just grabbing a camera on his shoulder and pushing in to keep everything in focus and hoping it looks okay.
But it works for those films because they do have that sort of over-the-top personality about them, so it makes sense to do a Dutch angle, push in, close up with distorted fisheye lens when you've got a giant zombie creature who's got another zombie creature in its belly, right? And you've got a dude who's mowing them, literally mowing them down with a lawnmower blade. It's just blood gushing everywhere. Like, we don't need hyper realism for that, right?
Because of the technology that you're shooting it with and everything, it just kind of looks like it fits. And I really enjoyed this movie, but I definitely see your point. I thought, our mariachi lead character, Carlos Gallardo, that gets confused with Azul because they both have guitar cases. I love that was kind of that's all you needed. Oh, he has a guitar case. It's him. It's a guy, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they also say he's like dressed in black at one point or something. It's like, oh, well, there's only one person who would ever dress in black and carry a guitar case. Like, that's not an archetype of person by any means.
Did you think he looked? So when he first came on the screen, I'm like, whoa, that's Mexican Howie Mandel. And then as the movie progressed, I'm like, that's John Cryer from Pretty in Pink. And then it progressed a little more. I'm like, no, he's Ferris Bueller now. But he was always somebody else.
Honestly, that's funny. It's funny that you say that because for some reason, whatever reason, I couldn't get out of my head like young George Lopez. It was kind of weird. Dude.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then maybe like the next scene, he would kind of have like a young Mario Lopez sort of thing. Right? I don't know. There's a man of many faces is what we're saying. So I actually do want to play a clip here real quick. So shortly after we get that sort of silly scene in the bar, he ends up leaving that. He's trying to find work as a mariachi. Azul, the drug dealer, shows up in the next bar, and he has his black guitar case filled with the weapons. It kind of sets up our case of mistaken identity. And this is going to, like I said, this is in the English dub. So just revel in the magnificence that is this clip of English dubbed El Mariachi.
What the hell is this? Mariachi Day? There's no work for you either.
Cantinero, una cerveza. In a bottle way. I'm looking for a very good friend of mine. His name is Moko. Where is he?
He's here sometime. He owns the bar.
So, you know him.
Here, your beer.
Of course. We work for Moko.
Too bad. Hold this.
Yeah, man. So it's like if you want 80 minutes of that type of production and accent and everything else that goes along with it, definitely check out that Crackle version for free. Like I said, it might make for a really fun sort of drinking game or something like that. There's something there, dude. But listeners, you figure it out. Hit us up at Esoterica Cinema. Let us know what drinking game you came up with to watch the English dub of Crackle, man. I know some of you guys out there got something fun, and let's just make a whole game out of this thing, man. So yeah. But after that, we actually get like our first sort of action scene, really. So it's when he checks into the motel. Once again, we get that sort of like fast sped up thing where the motel owner calls, I guess, Moko, right? And informs him that the guy's here. And it's, again, for, a low budget action scene, it's pretty well orchestrated. Like Rodriguez is being smart about his shot choices and a lot of that sort of decision making that goes into to directing. So, he's shooting everything. It looks good. And then, from there we get like the requisite chase scene, and he does the little sort of move where he like zip lines down, the electrical cords and ends up on the car, and then they're chasing him through. And all of these things are like pretty decently done. But at the same time, like, you're not going to mistake this for Michael Mann or anything like that. Like, once again, this is a movie, you talk about something like Man of Steel where you can like see the $200 million up on the screen. This is a movie where you can see the $7,000 up on the screen. I mean, let's just be honest here, but again, like, charming, the fact that this kid just made the best of what he had. And Again, now he's Robert Rodriguez and I'm Jason Peters, right? So one of us did something right, and it wasn't me.
Yeah, I mean, he made a movie, kudos to him. And just getting that done back then. I mean, this is a time before digital. This is a time before YouTube tutorials, where to get your film out. Like, there's no digital copy that you could just blanket to all your festivals. You got to, actually make prints and send them out. Like, this is a big thing back then. And it was the last time it was a big thing. I mean, it's still a big thing. I haven't made a movie. But it's easier, I think, to get a seat at the table now than it used to be. It's certainly more affordable to just go out and make something. I think we get in our own way a lot now because we make too much of it. This guy didn't. He just went out against all odds and made a damn thing. The chase scene was pretty funny. They closed down a block and they just kept running up and down the same street. He was in the back of a truck following them. And it looks like they've run across town because it's a really long chase scene.
Here's the thing, though. It really doesn't, buddy. It really doesn't, dude. That scene in particular made me chuckle because, they're just running back and forth, and it's just here's a close-up of this guy running. Here's a close-up of the other guy running. Back to a close-up of the other guy running. Guess what? Another close-up of that previous guy running. And it's can you just get
it's all shot so
other
tight.
framing and cut that in here, dude? And I swear they've run past the same store 7 times. Come on, dude.
No. Well, that's what I was just going to say. They just closed down one block, and you could see a lot of the same backdrops behind them. And then when they're done, if you look over our Mariachi's shoulder at the very end, it seems like he's run across town, or it's supposed to seem that way. And he's got the same bar that he left when he started right over his shoulder. I guess this is also the first time in the film when they're doing this chase scene that I really started to pay attention to the sound design. Apparently, because you hear them breathing really heavy, the music kind of drops out, and you're kind of in the moment, and the sound design kind of brings you in a little bit into that chase scene because the visuals really don't. So you hear a lot of footsteps, you hear a lot of heavy breathing. Apparently, he recorded everything with just a microphone going into a tape cassette recorder, and he would do the entire dialogue of the whole film. He would film them because he didn't have a sound guy, so he'd film them doing it on camera. And then because cameras back then didn't have audio inputs, you would go up with his tape recorder and stick a microphone in and have them redo the line as close to how they just performed it a second ago as possible. He would film this whole movie in one take. He would never do second takes. So everything you see is pretty much one take, and he would try to shoot as long as he could until his actors messed up. And the second they would mess up, that would be his edit point. And then he would move camera and get them to pick it up from there. Kind of the same way we make this podcast.
So he straight Jay-Z'd El Mariachi, just one take king.
I guess.
Just bam, one take. I Calculon style. I don't do second takes.
Absolutely. So one take Robbie.
So let's get back to the film here real quick.
Doing that, the sound and recording the sound design that way, I just thought there were fans that he would show the fan, and you'd hear an exaggerated foof, 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 and footsteps were good. Breathing was heavy, and I really thought it was a fun way to watch a movie. I appreciated that he recorded the sound that way.
Yeah, well, and as you know, because again, for anyone listening, Ryan does make a living doing sound in the old entertainment industry for various entities. So if anybody knows good sound, it's going to be him. And as you point out often, it's the one thing that so many people overlook that has such a dramatic effect on the finished product, because people don't, everyone's worrying about the cinematography and the acting and this and that, and what lens are we on? Meanwhile, you've got everything that sounds like it's being recorded in a tin can box and sounds like shit, and there's no sound effects when people are walking, and so it's got this just sort of hollow, amateurish feel. So it's definitely recognized that Rodriguez recognized the importance of sound design and didn't ignore it. So again, props to him for this. It is really just. The reason this film doesn't work at the end of the day for me is it's just a lack of resources, and it's like this kid's sort of demo tape, right? It speaks to what he's
Right.
going to become, but it's still, his first movie. It's, hard 8 for
That's
PTA.
a great way to describe it.
Yeah, it's and I haven't seen Following, but I imagine it's the same way with Chris Nolan, where it's like, there's elements here that are. I feel that way about Pi. I know people love Darren Aronofsky's Pi. I think that it's a decent film that speaks to the person that he's going to become, but like, I don't love watching that movie. It's more of just an interesting note, in terms of how Darren Aronofsky broke into filmmaking. So it's kind of like that, again, it's a good representation of his vibe and what he's going to do, but in and of itself, I can't say that it's necessarily enjoyable.
I couldn't agree more, and that's a great way to phrase it with the demo tape. So our mariachi gets mistaken for our big bad guy, the Azul. Azul and Moko are two gang leaders, whatever, that are kind of at odds. Somehow our mariachi gets caught up in this because he resembles Azul in the sense that he has a guitar case. His is really a guitar case. Azul's is a guitar case full of guns. Dude, our mariachi shit escalates very quickly. Next thing you know, he's caught up in the middle of it. He somehow talks our femme fatale's Domino's. She's a bar owner. He goes in to try to pitch himself to get a job. Next thing you know, he's living there.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I just killed four men out in the street. I need a place to hide. She's like, I don't know. I feel kind of weird about this. Yeah, bitch, you should totally feel weird about this. Like, don't let this man inside your house. He is a killer. He just said so.
Before we progress, Ryan, that's one of the other clips that I have, is that scene right there. And I mean, she does sort of pick up the phone to call the cops, but it's very half-assed. So let's go ahead and play that for the listeners here.
And this is the
quick.
English dubbed? This is the English dubbed version
You're going to get
of that
this
scene?
in all of its 90s-tastic English dub glory. Here we go.
I love it.
¿Qué te pasó, Mariachi? Did you drink too much soda?
I just killed 4 men.
Is it true?
Wait a minute. What is your name?
Domino.
Wait a minute. Domino was self-defense. I'm not from here. I don't know anybody. I don't have any friends or enemies.
Then they were thieves.
I don't know. There were 4 men. And I'm staying in the cheapest hotel. No money, nothing of value. They were only interested in killing me.
And why did you come here? So they could kill me or what?
You see, I really need somewhere to stay until all of this passes over. They're confusing me with someone else. I'm just a mariachi.
I have a room upstairs. My room. Don't touch anything. I'll be up later, and we'll call a friend of mine.
Gracias. I'll never forget this.
So yeah, man, once again, like some pretty heavy Cinemax vibes on there. And then right after that, we get that scene where she like threatens him in the bathtub with, what we think is like a knife, but it ends up being a letter opener. And she's like, sing a whole song. And he's like, blah, 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 like, and it's just like, and then immediately after that, we get another like, no, not immediately, but like 2 or 3 scenes later, like he's down in the bar and then he gets the whole 5-minute song. And it's like, again, man, it felt like that Bo Diddley moment in Fritz the Cat, like the other day, like just, you're an 80-minute film. You can't use music for 5 to 7 minutes of filler, dude. Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, he was pretty bold to just go. 1 minute he was killing people out on the street. And then he was like, I need a place to duck out. You know, can I just hide upstairs? She's like, begrudgingly gives in. Then this guy just like strips down naked and helps himself to a bath. No big deal. And she comes walking in. There's like some naked murderer is in my bathtub. And she's like, you know, I'm going to go handle that. I don't know, man. The whole thing just kind of... This is also when around the time that he, you know, I think there's no less than 3 or 4 dream sequences in the film that kind of come off a
with
little
like
weird.
his severed head and stuff and the kid, and again, dude, it kind of just felt like filler. He wrote like a and here's the interesting thing. I didn't even think about it until right now, because I was about to say that like it feels like he wrote a television program, but now that I'm saying it out loud, like wasn't that originally what this was for? I think I read that, right? Like he was gonna release it on Mexican television, and then like Columbia Pictures at the last minute came in and was like, "Hey kid, like we like your film, like we want to bring it stateside and promote it there." And so they spent like $200,000 to like basically adapt it for American audiences, and then another couple mil to promote it. So, but yeah, so I think that a lot of these things are like just where the studio was like, listen, kid, you know, you've got 40 minutes of great program here. We need you to double that. What can you do? And he's like, well, I like music and I've got silly cartoon scenes in my head that I can throw in. And they're just like, I love it, kid. You're great. You know, here's a bowl of cereal. Get along here, you little whippersnapper. Like, it just feels very young
edgy. The kids will love it.
Yeah, also some great 90s tastic synth drums throughout, you know, the like just that perfect suspenseful 90s synth music, you know, where it was just like whatever the question was, the answer was more synths.
Yeah. I mean, there was, I think, some pretty heavy saxophone in there too, as well. I don't know.
It was probably just the synth saxophone, though. It's probably just that setting.
Yeah, it was definitely on a Casio or Yamaha keyboard back then. Yeah, everything kind of felt a little disjointed. The nuts and bolts of this film were good. It, like you said, it shows promise of a future career. Even the ending of the film was a little off. You could kind of see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Peter Marquardt's acting as Moko was way, way over the top, like telenovela over the top.
Yeah.
Which, again, to your point, maybe what they were shooting for. This movie, when I finished watching this film, all it did was make me want to go watch Desperado and
Once Upon a Time
Dusk
in
Till
Mexico.
Dawn and some of his. No,
Mexico
not that one.
trilogy.
All the rest.
I never saw that one. I heard it was bad, but I know that's the third in his like quote unquote Mexico trilogy. Yeah.
Again, you know, I think you said this before, where I much like yourself, I have a very love-hate relationship with Robert Rodriguez. And it's not even per movie. Like each movie, I both love and hate, like within the confines of said movie. So, there are a few really good classics I love from Dusk Till Dawn.
Same.
I love Planet Terror.
Same.
I remember liking Desperado. I need to go back and rewatch it, though, because as we're finding out, some of these movies from the early 90s, mid-90s didn't really hold up. So I'm really curious about Desperado. I hope I still like it. I really do. Sin City was great, too.
Oh, yeah. I came late to Desperado. So, like, pretty much everybody I know that loves Desperado, that was, like, one of their, like, first really big action movies. And it was also like right about the time that they were 14, and you just had prime Salma Hayek there, which I maintain was a lot of reason that a lot of these people loved that film so much when they were teenagers. So I came to it late, right? And so being in your 20s and I think experiencing Desperado is probably way different than being in your 14 and being in your teens and being 14 and experiencing Desperado. So I don't remember loving it. It was one of those things I saw once just because. Honestly, I think everybody had been telling me to watch it by that point. It was like 10 years of like, you got to see it, you got to see it. Finally see it. You're like, this is what I didn't want to see it. I knew I was going to like it as much as you guys do. And I also am just not, like, kind of like you said, I have a love-hate relationship with Rodriguez. Like, first of all, he's one of those guys I want to like more than anything in the world. Like, let's just get that out of the way. Like, I'm typically rooting for Robert Rodriguez, right? I love From Dusk Till Dawn and Planet Terror, like you mentioned. I think his style is a little bit schlocky, and it maybe lends itself well to, you know, some of the more like horror related films that he does. I never.
Machete was great. I love Machete.
It's fine. I mean, I saw it once.
I liked it.
I didn't dislike it. I can't say I loved it, and I'm still waiting for Thanksgiving, first of all, too. So until that comes out, I could give a shit about machete kills and all that.
Little biased.
Come on, Eli, bring it for us here. But so yeah, let's just go ahead and let's jump to sort of pretty much the end of this film, because there's a lot of sort of just like, you know, Azul is being mistaken at one point. Their guitar cases do get switched, and then, you know, and our main character, the Mariachi, ends up actually getting kidnapped by Moko's henchmen and brought to Moko. And then Moko's like, oh, that's not the right guy because he's looking for Azul. And then he like just has him sort of unceremoniously dumped back into the street. And that's another thing that I did think was weird about this film, Ryan, is that like the Mariachi, he's supposed to be our protagonist, but like he kind of exists outside the central conflict of the film. Like the central conflict of the film
Yes, he does.
is between Azul and Moko, and he's just kind of this bystander, right? And
Right.
even to the point where, like I said, like he gets kidnapped by the bad guy, and the bad guy's like, send it back. That's trash. I don't want it. Like, well, you're supposed to be going after the main character. That's supposed to be like the object of your pursuit, and vice versa. So that was probably also just sort of a weird structural thing that made it play not as well for
I felt
me.
like everybody was on the outside of the central conflict of this film. I
Yeah.
felt like there was no real rooting for the protagonist or against the antagonist. Everybody was just kind of like flopped in there, you know? I don't know. The flavors didn't really meld in the pot to me to make it like a cohesive struggle. I really never knew who I was rooting for, who I was following. Obviously, I'm supposed to be rooting for the Mariachi. But everything he kind of found himself in was by complete accident. Again, It was very, by the time we get into the conflict, I felt it was almost like Robert Rodriguez doing a sequel to Ferris Bueller. Like it was a very Ferris Bueller kind of, no, I'm now in this bucket of syrup, sticky hot water situation. How do I get out of this? You know? Like,
No, I hear you. So by the end, we do get that showdown, you know, which is kind of central to every film that's kind of in this vein. And I do have a clip of that as well that I'll play us. So Azul ends up kidnapping the woman that's the bartender. And of course, you know, by this point, the Mariachi and her kind of have feelings for one another. And so Azul's kidnapped her.
after what could only be like 24 hours. By the way.
Yeah.
It all escalated very quickly.
Yeah, we warped speed through right through the development of that relationship. They met and then they were in love. That's that. No questions asked. We got a movie to move forward with here, and so we're gonna go ahead and listen to that final scene between Moko and Azul. Let's listen.
Perdóname. I'm sorry he used you to get to me.
Moko, pay me what you owe, or I'll soak your clothes in her blood!
Let her go, Azul. You'll get your share.
Make me a map to where I can find Moko.
What did you do with him?
¿Quién?
The mariachi that they confused with Azul.
So that's why you hung up on me last night. Running around without me? With that pinche mariachi all over you!
Give me what you owe me now!
After everything I've done for you! This is how you treat me?
I never asked for anything until now. Let him go!
I swear I'm gonna kill her!
You're not gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her!
Once again, Ryan, you gotta love that 90s dubbing. It is fantastic.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and then after this, I suppose, you know, he's trying to go for some sort of poetic justice thing Rodriguez is, but it also, I don't think the mariachi really did anything to warrant his hand getting shot the way that it did. I think we were supposed to be like, oh, the mariachi lost his ability to play his guitar, but he ends up getting his hand shot through and he falls to the ground. And then there's just that whole thing where the gun's conveniently lying next to him. I think probably was maybe Azul's. And he sort of grabs it and shoots Moko. And, we get the slow motion death. And then all the goons around him just sort of fail to react. And this was really disappointing for me, Ryan, because I was really hoping that this was something where Rodriguez was kind of holding his chips back for the end. I mean, again, I know $7,000 is nothing, right? But I was hoping where it's like, okay, we haven't got much action through this quote-unquote action movie. I hope that he's saving it for the end and we can at least get like a 7-minute shootout chase, whatever, right? But instead, it's just this very sort of anticlimactic moment where it's very convenient and there's a single gunshot that rings out, and it's just it's like, hey, you know what? We're done here. We hit our 80 minutes, and let's call this a wrap. Everyone's got wives and girlfriends to get home to.
Yeah, gotta wash those flannel shirts.
So then, he just sort of rides off into the sunset. He's unable to play again. And I do also wonder, how much of this movie maybe got its attention because it was so inexpensive, right? Like, if Rodriguez made this movie for $7,000, I mean, you think they were able to buy it from him as a 23-year-old kid for like 14 to 20 and be like, hey, kid, you'll double your money. This is a great deal for you. And he's like, wow, I doubled my money. I made $7,000. And then they're just like, ha ha, stupid kid. I don't know if maybe that played into
I get it. I don't think there's any better way to describe it than you already did, which is this is probably like a mixtape. Like, I think Robert Rodriguez Master P'd the fuck out of this. He sold a mixtape out of the back of his car, and it caught on, and people liked it. He went on to get a lot more money down the road. I would argue, some movies, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, for him. Sometimes he does better work with more money, sometimes he doesn't. But I enjoy his films. I enjoyed this film. It was a fun romp for the times. I remember my dad had that exact same Ford F-150 that gets used a lot in the movie. So there was a lot of nostalgia to this.
Yeah.
It just made me want to watch Desperado. Because Desperado, say what you will about Desperado, but it does give you the 7-minute shootout. It does give you Danny Trejo chucking knives through the sunroof of a limousine. It gives you a lot of these things that you wanted from this movie that you're like, I'll stick through the schlockiness. I'll stick through all of this, the Casio keyboard 5-minute scene or whatever for no reason. And the dream sequences and blah, blah, blah. But you just want a little more payoff at the end. And I think that's where Desperado succeeds, where this fails.
Fair enough. Like I said, I'm not at all familiar. I really don't remember anything.
He certainly stepped up his guitar case budget, because the guitar case in this film, full of guns, look like the guns are just straight up rattling around in that case. They don't look secured at all. The guitar case is not a good one. The one in Desperado, though, it's all custom fitted and velvet lined, and Antonio Banderas looks like a badass grabbing grenades and shit. It's all got secret doors. I don't know.
Yeah. No. The cat got some money to play with, and he put it to good use. For sure.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and wrap this up as we do all of our episodes with 3 adjectives. Hit me up, Ryan. What you got?
Actually, I used telenovela as one of my first words. Namely, and so that all kind of started with the... I instantly felt like I was watching a telenovela when the girl in the pool was at Moko's house.
Oh, yeah. Like early on, yeah.
We follow her, and like there's an opening tracking shot, and she like pretty girl comes around in a bikini, very stereotypical early 90s stuff, and then she dives in. We follow her under the water.
It's all
and
in like
she comes
slow-mo.
up revealing Moko, but not his face. Yeah, and then she's in every shot with Moko as like his.
She kind of had like a young Sofia Vergara vibe. She's kind of pretty.
A bit. It just felt like a Mexican telenovela trope to me, to always have the pretty girl in the bikini. I don't know.
That's also the action trope, right? I mean, whether it's Mexican telenovela or, American, balls to the wall action movie, like
to an
there's
extent,
always a pretty girl in there,
yeah.
hot chick, whatever.
I think RoboCop has a lot of that too. To bring that back around, I think we're going to see some of that back with RoboCop as well. So
you really want to watch
it was
RoboCop,
kind of an 80s,
don't you?
90s thing. Yeah, I'm really ready for RoboCop. So telenovela, cheap, because it did feel cheap.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad, that's up to the viewer. And kind of boring. I was kind of bored because I never knew who to root for. The dream sequences kept taking me out of it. I wanted more out of this film than it gave me. Like you said, I see glimpses of greatness, but it ain't there yet.
Yeah.
So keep on going. It was kind of boring.
Yeah, it really was, dude. I had a note that I didn't say, but right around 60 minutes, I have a note. Like, I shouldn't be ready for a movie to be over after 60 minutes. Like, that's
just glad it was 80 minutes long.
Yes. At least the filmmakers were courteous enough to wrap this up quick once they realized that we didn't need to go any longer than it did.
They were out of money, let's be honest. I don't think it was for our benefit.
My 3 adjectives, Ryan. The first one I'm going to give is energetic. There was a lot of energy behind this film. Obviously, he's a young kid. He's eager to please. He's eager to show his chops, get out there, make movies, get a little bit of money. So there is some energy behind this. Got to give it that.
Well, again, though, remember, the energy was because he had to cut every time his actor screwed up because he was only doing one take. So it's a lot of fast edits because sometimes he might have only gotten 30 seconds out of them. And it's like, okay, let me change camera angles. I'm rolling and go.
Yeah.
And then they would pick right up again. And so that's where a lot of that kinetic energy comes from, is the fast edits out of necessity. So
interesting. Yeah, that's
sometimes
fair.
It's happy mistakes.
Yeah,
happy mistakes.
Happy accidents, right? We love them.
Yeah.
Second adjective.
That's the phrase. Happy accidents.
Second adjective I got is thin. Obviously, this is a movie with not much meat on the bone. Like I said,
no meat on the bone.
It's an action movie without much action. So, all the pitfalls of low budget filmmaking that go along with making that type of film. And the other thing is I got his routine. It's just, it's a by the numbers film. It doesn't try to be really, I mean, the filmmaking itself perhaps is clever, like we talked about with regards to shot selection and some of the directorial decisions that he makes. But in terms of the actual story structure itself, very routine, by the numbers, something you're going to see, like I said, 1 a.m., Cinemax, Showtime, just, a very direct-to-video sort of thriller feel. So let's go ahead and formalize this, Ryan. Why don't you give me your grade rating on this film? What you got?
This one is a tough one, Jason, because are you grading it for what you thought it was? Are you grading it for what he became? Or are you grading this film for just what it is? And if I'm grading the film for just what it is and taking out of, the situation, who made it and why and the time and place and all of that and how much money, the movie itself is going to get it like a D, D plus, maybe C minus if I'm giving some extra credit. But, because of what it did, because of its place in history, where it led his career, I could step this up to a solid C minus C grade rating.
All right.
What do you think?
I think that you need to decide, buddy. You got to tell us what you're going with here, man. Let's lock this down, dude. You can't tell us what you might do in a hypothetical situation. That situation is upon you, so answer it.
Right. So here's the deal. I would pass you, taking out of context, you play football and you're contributing to the team. Let's go ahead and give it a C minus.
All right.
I'll meet it in the middle.
Fair enough. Yeah, I kind of did something similar. So again, for anybody listening that doesn't recall, he gives the grade ratings. I give the star ratings. My star rating is a 2.5 out of 5. And again, much like you, that is taking into account all of the circumstances behind the film, the lack of budget, the first-time filmmaker, younger guy, everything that goes along with it, no professional actors, etc., etc., etc. If I'm taking this film just on its own merits, I'm going to go ahead and give it 2 stars, possibly even as low as 1.5 if I'm in a bad mood. But yeah, so it's got a caveat with it for sure. But again, we do have to take into account circumstances, right? It's a degree of difficulty thing, right? even the Russian judge takes into account when the degree of difficulty is high, and so we need to do the same. So he gets that extra half star from me. Gonna call it 2.5 out of 5, with the caveat that it's probably a 2-star film.
That's fair. I mean, because of the nature of this situation, you could have told me 1 star, you could have told me 4, and you could have made an interesting argument for both.
Yeah.
I would have believed you on both.
Yeah.
This is just a beauty is in the eye of the beholder situation. Some of you guys are going to watch this and like it. Some of you are going to be like, ugh, what were they even thinking about? But I hope that through the podcast, we kind of explained somewhat properly that we see both sides, and it is what it is.
Yeah,
I do think I'm going to go watch Desperado this week, though. I'm really curious about rewatching Desperado.
Yeah, dude, you'll have to let us know what you think, or I don't know, do some sort of bonus episode, or just throw it out there on your Twitter or something like that. But to everybody, thanks for listening. As a reminder, you can catch us on the Twitter at Esoterica Cinema. We love to hear from you. We appreciate the follow, and we also appreciate you reaching out and telling us what you thought about our program, telling us what you thought about this film. Was it your first time seeing it? Had you not seen it in forever? Do you hate the shrill nasal quality of my voice? Whatever it is, you can hit us up at Esoterica Cinema. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if maybe you have a little bit more that you'd like to say and 280 characters kind of limits you, you can send us an email, esotericacinema@gmail.com. Once again, hit us up about anything, whether you have some hot take on a movie we did or you have some hot take on a muffin you just ate. Either way, let us know. And we will be back in 2 weeks with a full episode. That episode, we will be looking at Solaris and Wild Strawberries, so make sure to join us for that. And thanks a lot for hanging out with us today on Esoterica Cinema. In a small town south of the border, chaos and anarchy have replaced law and order, all under the watchful eye of local drug lord Irukto.
Irukto, why did you shoot my brother? He was himself a man of God.
Well, then I guess you could say I left him holier than thou. But when Irukto orders a failed hit on one of his men, a drug dealer named Rojo hits the streets looking for revenge. You better be prepared, Irukto. I'm coming. I hope you're wearing protection. Sure am. I got a big black 28-incher that takes up both my hands. Meanwhile, completely removed from the central conflict at hand, a mariachi arrives looking for work, and instead finds a super hot chick named Yahtzee with no suitors, who immediately falls in love with his broke ass. I am myself a simple mariachi. Do you know how to play any instruments, Yahtzee?
I do play one hell of a skin flute. My mother taught me, and her mother before her. After school, I used to stay late and practice with Mr. Sancho for hours.
Hachi mariachi! But when Irukto learns that Yahtzee no longer cares for him, and never did, he flies into a jealous rage. Why are you rolling the dice with my heart? You're tearing me apart, Yahtzee! See the movie critics are hailing as not bad, sort of okay, and better than Once Upon a Time in Mexico. It's El Mariachi 2, El Mariachier. Coming soon.
From the imagination of acclaimed author Ashton Macaulay comes the next great anti-hero in American fiction. His name is Nick Ventnor, alcoholic by trade and monster hunter by profession. When Nick gets hired by a wealthy benefactor to find the lost gates of Shangri-La, it's up to him and his crotchety companion James to deliver the goods. The two soon find themselves on the adventure of a lifetime. And in addition to being chased by Nick's longtime rival, Manchester, they soon find themselves being hunted by a mythical and elusive Yeti that has been terrorizing the Himalayas. Featuring non-stop action and an acerbic wit, Whiteout by Ashton Macaulay is a thriller-minute page-turner you won't be able to put down until it's finished. You can find Whiteout in ebook, hardcover, and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.